Welcome to another world. First of all, I just want to introduce the space. We are a communist, abolitionist, anti-imperialist community space engaged in hyper-local organizing right here in Crown Heights. We are open from Wednesday to Sunday, 11 to 8. Events all the time. Please check us out. If you feel so moved, we have QR codes where you can donate. Everything you see around you is free. The books, the food, the clothes. I just want to also say communist, abolitionist, anti-imperialist, those are all synonyms. Um, and it is a huge, I mean this sincerely, the people here are some of the people I admire the most in the whole world. So it's very exciting to be able to connect the comrades in this room to the people on the screen. Can you guys hear us okay? You feeling good? So, top left corner, we have Ghassan and Najjar, the coordinator of the Burin Land and Agricultural Cooperative. When I asked him what bio I should give him, he said, the man who will destroy the world. I actually think that's true. He's a dear friend, he's insane. There's Ameed Faleh, a Palestinian writer and scholar, dear friend as well, member of the Good Shepherd Collective, one of the most incisive, brilliant collectives, and they make a brilliant publication that I recommend everyone subscribe to. And Fathi Nimer, a man I kept on running into in Ramallah, which was lovely. And every time I talk about you with people, people just know you. You're such a man about town, Fathi. He is a writer with the al-Shabaka, the Palestinian policy network. And this is Baqa. Fatin, I'm so sorry. Fatin Jarara, a organizer here in Lenape King, New York City, so-called New York City, primarily with PAL-Awda, New York, New Jersey, longtime organizer, and also like an amazing organization doing some of the most important work in the city when it comes to the topic that we are discussing today. This is Baqa, the panel. Thank you for being here. My name is Naseem. I will be inserting myself very rudely as a fifth panelist and give a little portion if you allow me. Is that okay? Okay. Nobody said yes, but thank you. I went to Palestine for the olive harvest in October and November, and I just want to tell a story about that. I've been struggling to talk about the trip actually for a number of reasons. One of chief among them is that there wasn't a real unifying narrative arc to the trip. And the more that I think about it, it's very Palestinian. I don't know. Ameed might wince at me exceptionalizing Palestinians like that, but it did feel like a very particularly Palestinian relationship to time and events because everything just felt like a string of absurd, intense, times terrifying, and times devastating vignettes that sort of didn't have any rhyme or reason. And it made me appreciate why Ghassan kind of found he's a short story writer rather than a novelist, and why Ilyas Suleiman's films kind of plot is a secondary concern. So I'll tell one vignette and hopefully be able to extract some points I'd like to make about protective presence and the practice of protective presence as a form of solidarity. Late past the end of the olive harvest, we went to Wadi Ghana to pick our oranges and lemons, citrus fruit. And Wadi Ghana was, honestly, one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. It's this gorgeous valley, sort of rolling green hills, And it felt really special to be there because it was one of the only places I went to in the West Bank. And granted, I didn't see all of the West Bank, but where the when you're in Palestine, your movement is constantly constrained. And everywhere you look, there's reminders of the occupation. Everywhere. Whether it's the horizon dotted with settlements or the Stars of David spray painted as like a threat for destruction and so why they kind of felt like there was none of that pressure. There was a little stream, there was picnic tables, there was Palestinian families having leisure, which is so precious. We picked oranges. A few days later, Wadi Qana is oh yeah, the Israelis designated it as an ecological preserve, so Palestinians aren't allowed to build on Wadi Qana, and because Israelis care a lot about the environment, as they show every day. After we left, a couple days later, the IOF came and uprooted 200 trees that belonged to, it was basically the entire harvest of 3 farming families. Devastating. And I didn't really appreciate how violent uprooting trees is until I went to Palestine. Like the amount of time and care and sort of love and hope that you invest in the future when you grow a fruit tree, like just dash. So Ghassan, being the man that he is, nothing is impossible to this man. We decided, fuck it, we'll raise enough money, we'll buy 200 trees and we'll replant them. And we did. We raised a ton of money very quickly, thanks to a lot of the comrades in this room, and purchased the trees and went back to plant them. It took a while, but I actually was I didn't make it to the day that they planted because I injured myself. I burned my hand making coffee in Ramallah. Very embarrassing. When we went back to plant the trees, the rolling hills, that beautiful picturesque picnic spot, was completely ruined. Every square meter of that place was covered in cow shit. The settlers came and brought what must have been the herds of several farms to graze on that land and absolutely covered it. The smell was unbearable. There was nowhere to, I mean, honestly, people were frolicking. I mean that like in and you just couldn't do that anymore. Like, and I wanted to tell that story to just show how like Palestinian joy, Palestinian life, every aspect of existence has to be stuffed out, right? They cannot abide it. Zionism must destroy Palestinian life. It's a death cult, right? And I just wanted to show how petty it was. And that's not, I'm curious if how the people in Japan are doing. So what is Q&A? I'd love to ask. If you'll allow me just some observations about protective presence from that story, right? We weren't able to stop the IOF from protective presence is, so just so you know, it's the practice of going to Palestine and putting your body between settlers or the IOF to stop them from doing violence on Palestinians. And the idea is that it's supposed to like they're supposed to be scared of like hurting foreigners, so they won't do it. And I think it's true. I think that there is a preventative aspect of being there and putting your body on the line. I think it's a good practice, right? It's an act of solidarity. But for the most part, it defers violence. We can't be there forever. And then the second reason people go is to document the crimes that the IOF commits. Which we did, but like to what end, right? So in my mind, I want to make a critique of protected presence, but not a condemnation of it. And I'm stealing all of these ideas from Cody O'Rourke and Lara Kilani from the Jarara Collective. Read their work. Their piece about protected presence is brilliant. I co-sign it. We reproduced a lot of power imbalances, right? First, we like took for granted that Palestinian witnesses are not adequate, right? Even though Palestinians are extremely good at documenting the crimes that are committed against them. And then we created a situation where we controlled essentially like this network of donors, right? Which is the infrastructure for an organization. Palestinians aren't in control of that infrastructure. And their dependence on it creates a level of disciplinary power, right? They have to project a certain kind of subjectivity to cater to like this Western gaze, right? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't do this practice, but I do think when you do it, you should be critical and think about what you're feeding into. The one thing that I think was unequivocally good is that we harvested food. And we shortened the harvest time so that settlers had less time to come steal shit, which is what they do. So go. But remember that protective presence is a tactic that has to be rooted in a larger strategy. And the larger strategy that I like fully feel like I don't have a complicated feeling about is the strategy of increasing food sovereignty in Palestine, rooted in the idea that we can go donate our like labor and our expertise and our time to the project of stabilizing the rural economy in Palestine. That is one of the most important tasks we could do as a movement. And yeah, always root yourself in the ability for Palestinians to remain and resist. I think that's enough of me. Thank you so much for indulging me. I think I'll pass it to Fathi, if you're ready.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me and my colleagues here to speak about this topic. I apologize if we're a little bit distracted. As you're all aware, we are probably hearing a lot of things going on over our heads right now. And all of our love and solidarity to all those resisting imperialism from Gaza to Iran and all over the world. But my thoughts are especially with our brothers and sisters in Gaza who are living in tents currently in this extreme cold. And the world is simply passed on with a new siege on Gaza since the beginning of the war. Okay, well, thank you for your introduction, Sammy. I think you really touched upon a lot of things that we could spend 10 hours talking about, honestly. So I'm just not going to talk for the whole 10 hours, maybe 9 hours. But you asked me to give kind of like a little bit of a crash course into food sovereignty, agroecology, and the political economy of the West Bank, which is where I'm based and where I have the most experience, where we have our farm in. The situation in Gaza is completely different, but over the last 2 years, we've seen a complete extermination of all agricultural land in Gaza, basically, and it's not something that we can talk about, like creating cooperatives and such. It's a completely different context to what is occurring in the West Bank or even within 48. So I think it's important for us, and you did mention this, is that we need to come back to the root, which is settler colonialism. We can't look at what is happening in the West Bank as merely an occupation, a military occupation, which by definition is supposed to be a temporary affair. It's absolutely not what is happening in Palestine. So settler colonialism in its core is about land. And not land in the symbolic sense, but land also in the material sense. It means it has the infrastructure for life, it has resources, it has water, it has all of these infrastructure that allows the creation of life, including agriculture and This is basically what allows Palestinians and other indigenous people to remain steadfast on their land. If they can't feed themselves, they can't free themselves. So from the very beginning of Zionist colonialism in Palestine, the Israeli regime understood this. And there's a quote by General Moshe Dayan after the occupation of the West Bank in '67, where he said basically, and I'm paraphrasing, you can find the exact quote online, but he said that if the city of Hebron received all of its utilities and its resources, water, electricity, from Israel, and they have to depend on Israel for these resources, then it's absolutely more effective than 1,000 battalion units. So he's basically saying that to tie Palestinian source of income, to tie the Palestinian source of resources, to tie Palestinian source of food to Israel is a more effective way to control them than naked violence. So Palestinians also understood this. And the agricultural cooperative has long been a form of a way to organize society in a way which allows space for resistance. Because if you don't have to worry about starving, then that frees you up to have more time to do other things. So there we see really kind of like a climax of this mode of thought during the first intifada. Of course, there were experiences before the first intifada. Actually, after the Nakba, agricultural cooperatives dropped by almost 80% in Palestine. There was a campaign to destroy agricultural cooperatives. And it started to recover slowly, but again, there are lots of obstacles in the way put intentionally by the Israeli regime. So this idea of self-reliance really came to its apex during the first Intifada, where we see committees, for example, for the collection of eggs in villages emerge, where they, as a source of protein, was seen as a way to democratize food. There are cooperatives such as a Skhifa, which means the shed. It was a cooperative in Bet Sahur. It was dedicated solely towards producing seeds, tools, and insecticides to train Palestinians how to basically start their own cooperatives. It was all a cost. It was not for profit. And this was so successful, these kind of major projects that went throughout all of these different cities and all these different regions, that over 500,000 trees were planted between 87 and 89, the first couple of years of the Intifada. And that's a massive number. And it's important to understand that these were not just any trees. They were productive trees. They were fruit trees. There were vegetables. You had there are things called victory gardens, Hadaqat al-Nasr, where every household and every neighborhood would come together and take out all these decorative trees and decorative plants, and they would start planting tomatoes, cucumbers, and producing trees for the sole purpose of lessening their dependence on the Israelis, which were intent and adamant about flooding Palestinian market with cheap Israeli vegetables to keep them, on the hook. So this strategy of planting so many trees and trying to do this self-sufficiency was so infuriating that Ishaq Rabin, which was defense minister at the time, he instructed the army to impose curfews at the time specifically of the harvest in these villages so that the crops would rot in the field. So he'd prevent anybody from going out and collecting the harvest that they spent. Like, I don't know how well you are versed in agriculture, but there are some crops, for example, like garlic and such, it takes 6 or 7, 8 months for it to come ripe. That's the whole year's harvest that you're working on. Similar with trees, you have one harvest per year. If it's gone, it's gone. That's probably your whole source of income for the year. So this was a very kind of targeted attack on this mode of production. So there have been lots of strategies employed by the Zionist regime to kind of de-develop the Palestinian economy. This is the term called de-development, which is kind of like to shrink development and keep it very under control and very, let's say, not able to actually grow in a natural way. They just want to keep Palestinians fed, but not prospering, the bare minimum. And this is also what we see in a lot of ways in the West Bank today, also happening under different ways. So there were, before Oslo and the erection of the Palestinian Authority, what happened through the de-development was these kinds of curfews and separating Palestinian regions from each other and trying to flood the market with cheap produce. After Oslo, they came through with these Paris protocols and the Oslo Accords. And the Paris protocols are basically the protocols that determined how the Palestinian economy should function, how it should look. And it's completely tied up to the Israeli economy. A lot of the occupation institutions that were there, for example, the Water Committee, that gave water to Palestinians and Israelis, of course, mostly to Israelis, and gave a veto on digging wells. It was basically reformulated from a military institution to a civilian institution that still has a military veto. So it was all of the same, but it had now somebody in a suit, like in a civilian suit, sitting in front of you instead of somebody in a military suit. But at the end of the day, Palestinians are still banned from digging wells in their own lands, even if there's water under their land. So this kind of the Palestinian Authority's whole program was, designed by the IMF and the World Bank and such. So it was supposed to be a neoliberal economy from scratch. It was actually one of a great experiment. They considered it like they never had a country where they could build from scratch a neoliberal economy. Usually, there's some kinds of subsidies and such, like in the region. They have to do readjustments. But Palestine, they're starting from scratch. So let's just start it. We don't even have any kind of nothing is publicly owned in Palestine. Everything is privately owned. Even public transportation is privately owned. So the new philosophy became, when it came to food sovereignty, instead of Palestinians able to feed themselves to create the space for resistance, all of these cooperatives were kind of absorbed into the new Ministry of Agriculture. It became about wanting to build a state. And these organizations help towards proving to the world that we are worthy of a state. So what happened to food sovereignty? Doesn't make sense. Why would you grow wheat when you can buy it cheaper from Ukraine? Instead, you people of Gaza, for example, one of the plans was the people of Gaza, who had high food insecurity, around, I believe, 17% at the time. They were suggested that they should grow flowers to sell to the European markets. And with the money from the flowers, then they could go buy food, whatever they want. This is called food security, that you have the means to obtain food, but not food sovereignty. You have the means to create your own food and to have control over your own food. And this is a critical difference, because the food security paradigm, which is unfortunately the mainstream paradigm, it completely neglects power dynamics. It completely neglects class differentiations, the material relations, commodity fetishism, all these things behind the scenes, that there is such a long process between something being a seed to being on your supermarket shelf. All of this is rendered invisible by capitalism and by commodity fetishism. Your relationship to a product becomes, what does the packaging look like? Is it a good flavor? Is it a good price? You don't know who grew this. You don't know if the seeds are, GMOs. You don't know if who owns the copyright for the seeds, for example. Who packages it? Where is it sent from the other side of the world? All of this becomes invisible, and that means less and less control. You don't know if there's insecticides. You don't know if it's being using like manure to grow it. It's all up for question marks. So food sovereignty seeks to take control of all of these things. And most importantly, it wants to use sustainable and local inputs and to cut all kind of dependence on foreign powers and dependence on outside inputs. Because if it's very clear, as the Israelis said, if they could control what we eat, that they could control a lot of what we can do. So this is unfortunately the policy of the PA has had a very detrimental effect on the agricultural sector in Palestine. It used to be 50% of GDP in 1967. Now it's barely 7%. And that number is from a few years ago. It's probably less by now. And the majority of those who still practice farming today, only 26% of them actually do it full time. The rest do it as a side thing, because you simply cannot make enough money to live decently in Palestine as a full-time farmer unless you have a certain specialty crop or a certain size of land, or if you have special market relations. But if you are the average farmer in Palestine, it's very difficult to make ends meet, because at the end of the day, who are you competing against? You're competing against a settler that gets subsidized water, that has economy of scale, where it can grow 10,000, 20,000 heads of cabbage, and he can afford to sell them for like 20 cents. But as a Palestinian, if you try to do that, you can't compete, because your water, your input, and everything is so much expensive. Not to mention checkpoints. If your produce goes bad, no, you have no protection. You have no kind of net to protect you from that. If you grow trees, like what Samuel was talking about, olive tree, and minimum means 5 to 6 years to start producing anything that's commercially viable to actually live off of. In those 5 and 6 years, if a settler comes and burns it down, who protects you? What are you going to do? you have absolutely no recourse. There's no kind of insurance, there's no kind of protection for you, and you might even have your land be confiscated. So what becomes more attractive for Palestinians in these rural areas is unfortunately to become exploited labor inside the Israeli economy, because it simply pays more, and because it's much more easy than having these kinds of plans where it could go up in smoke if a settler attacks you. It's much less risk in certain ways. So we're talking about maybe 10% of the whole Palestinian workforce is now, unfortunately, working inside the Green Line, and the vast majority of those are from rural areas. So I know I'm running out of time. I could talk a lot more about this, but food sovereignty has to provide an alternative, not just to produce food. We can't look at food produced by Palestinians as only, oh, I'm changing my consumption habits. Oh, I buy a piece of cabbage with a Palestinian flag instead of an Israeli flag. I'm resisting. It's much more than that. We have to look at investment in food as a strategic investment in the future, and that has costs, by the way. It's not easy. We're asking people to go back to the land. We're asking people to sacrifice stability to kind of prop up this economy of resistance. It's not just agriculture. Also, like the economy of resistance is much wider than that. It's not just purely consumption, it's also about being part of a social movement and a political movement. These things are very intertwined. So, it's if you want to counter people going into work inside the colonial economy, you have to have some kind of plan, you have to have some kind of alternative for them to work. And food sovereignty, in a way, could be, but it's also facing so many different problems with land confiscation, settler attacks, lack of water. It's very difficult. It's much easier said than done. So for food sovereignty to truly take effect in Palestine, I'm sure Ghassan and Ameed will be able to talk much more about the challenges that is facing the movement and the cooperatives in particular. The cooperatives in Palestine have a very difficult uh, uh, kind of ecosystem with the legal ecosystem and the political and the social and all that. So I'm sure they'll be able to talk about that more. I think I've reached the end of my time. So hopefully we can talk a little bit more in the Q&A if you have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Fathi. That was very comprehensive and really, really, really appreciate that. Next, we have Ghassan Habibi. Whenever you're ready.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, thank you so much for having me in this event. I really appreciate that. I want to just focus for us as a cooperative. What's the meaning cooperative for us and what we work, and what's the most important things to be like cooperative, real cooperative, because at this time, like really, we are like we face many challenge in the ground, and we need to talk about that, the challenge, and we need to talk about like the difficult situation we live as a cooperative and as a farmer also in the cooperative. And we're talking about the food sovereignty. First, our cooperative, like we are a small cooperative in Burin village, south of Nablus, like just we established in 2020. When we start the cooperative, we bit like, be honest, like two enemy in front of us. This enemy, like we need to challenge them as a cooperative, because we know that we will kind of like be as like a food for them. Our cooperative, our like enemy for us, it's the occupation. This is the first things, but the most dangerous like enemy we have, like the capitalism. The big problem we have, like really in the ground, that's like many people when they establish the cooperative to work in the ground, after a while of years, like 2 3 years, they change for the company. That's the problem. That's the problem that we have. Like, we don't know exactly what the mean cooperative, especially in Palestine. I will not like talking about the cooperative outside Palestine who have like a millions of farmers or a millions of people work together. I'm talking about like Palestine under occupation, under attack usually every day by the occupation. And we see like what we need from the cooperative. For me and for our like cooperative in Burin, we said and talk what we need from this cooperative. and why we choose the cooperative to work in the ground. Many people think the cooperative similar of the company, and this is the big challenge we have and we face in the ground. Yeah, because we're talking about food sovereignty and company, it's not connected. Yeah, it's difficult to connect it. Yeah. The other things we say the cooperative should be like struggle, economic, socialist, working in the ground. Without that, we are not cooperative. Sorry, many people they said I'm talking about cooperative, working together. Yeah, appreciate. There's many people work together, but in the ideology, they are not cooperative. They didn't follow the cooperative rules and we built, especially now under the occupation. You can see all the settlers since the occupation started in Palestine, and the kibbutz start established. They're starting as a cooperative. But which kind of cooperative? It's capitalism cooperative to control everything. That's the reality. That's what happened now on the ground. And I'm talking about people working the ground and who facing the challenge every day. And you're coming to tell me yeah, we are cooperative, but in the same time, I need to sell the 1 kilo tomato, for example, for 15 shekel. Okay, how does that work in this situation with us? It doesn't work because if you want to be in the cooperative, you have to look to your community first. You have to look to the struggle second, and you have to look the economic. We understand many people say we need to make some money. It's right, we need to make money, but in which way? In the capitalism way or in the socialist way? To make all the people work together and to build this future in the ground. Unfortunately, we work with the Palestinian Authority about the ideology, yeah, of the cooperative. It seems like we're working with the NGOs. Yani, we are working in left and they are working in right, or we sit with them. The funny thing is that they give us the permission, the certificate to work as a legal certificate. Yeah. But when you sit with them, we're talking this is not as working in the ground, as this is not what I want as Ghassan and the cooperative. They said this is the rules from the BA and you have to follow. So we think we're gonna continue work under the BA umbrella, or we will kind of jump that or open our window and working as we need. I think we decided to work as we need, and this is make more problem for us. Make problem for us because we say no to them. Yani, now we're living under shitty situation, sorry to say that, and we live under pressuring, attacking, and no one can protect us. We can protect ourselves as a farmer in the ground. And you're coming to it many rules against me, and you say to me, this is for the cooperative. No, this is not for the cooperative. This is for to surround me by the rules and don't let me to open the window. You need to close everything. For that, we start thinking out of the box. How? How we can think out of the box? We have money things to do within the ground. Every 6 months, as a cooperative, we give a training for 5 people, to be a member of the cooperative. And this is it's not allowed in the BA law. The BA law said every year you have to accept around 10 people. These 10 people should pay around 2,000 shekels, $600 or $700, yeah, for the participating. And also you have the BA should accept them or not. Okay, what about me? I am just the shatterhand, chess, you can move me where you want. No, we will not accept that. And we will not work like that as a cooperative. I know that our cooperative troublemaker a little bit. But we will not accept to use as they want, that's make money trouble for us. The other things, the occupation. The occupation try hard. first I get arrested in the beginning of the cooperative. I spent 1 year in the jail for just a cooperative. And almost I spent like 9 years in the prison. But 1 year just for we established the cooperative in the village. All the rules and procedure and everything in the cooperative, I wrote it in the isolation. I spent 4 months in the isolation. Like to have our cooperative look different than others. How like look different than others? Because we have something called think to others. I will not like think about myself and about the people whose work about me. No, I need to also to think about my community. I need to think about like others, people in the villages. Like for me, Wadi Kana, it's far away from Burin, like need like 40 minutes to arrive there. But I work there. I go there and help the farmers and give them suggesting and like be with them in solidarity. That's the real like work in the cooperative. You have to be unit with all the farmers in the ground, not just in Burin, not just in like in the villages around Burin. You have to make like network in the ground to work well. Yeah, the food sovereignty it's mean like you have to control everything in the ground. Yeah, to control for the farmers, not for the government, not for the occupation, not like listening to everyone like say to you this is like wrong and this is like right. You have to do it. No, we're not thinking like that. For that, we are in the trouble. For that, like we are under attack usually every day by the settlers and the army. And last week, they put it like the logo of our cooperative and my picture and the other girl's picture. And they say about me, like the most leftist, dangerous person in the area. He's taking the Israeli land. Okay, this is last week. Just 2 days ago, the soldier invaded my home to investigation me about that. That's like for us, give us more energy to work. And this is like the difference between us as a Palestinian farmer and the settlers, how we think. Yani usually, like as Ghassan, I'm ready to die for my land because the land is connected and related to our dignity. But the settlers, no, they're not ready to die for them land. And this is now the war between Iran and America and Israel. When you see the rocket, like for us, it's fun. We go out in the street and looking to the rocket. Yeah. For the settlers, they run away. That's the difference between us because we are believing this is our land. We will not leave it. That's like this people, the settlers. By the way, most of the settlers in Burin are from New York and Brooklyn. Yeah, they're not connected to the land. They never connected to the land. That's like many conversation we have with one of them when they attack us and coming to our greenhouse or the land. Like this is my grandfather house and this is like 3,000 years ago and all of that. I say, yeah, like you're ready to die for your land. You're ready, like your son and your daughter, to die for your land, as you said. They say no. They direct say no. I said to him, okay, if this is your land, why are you burning? Why are you cutting? Why are you poisoning the land? You know, many things you have like to understand this people and to study this people. The cooperatives become like dangerous for them because we start 5 person in Burin. Now we are 20 farmers. All of us finish university and we are young and we are youth like work together. That's like feel dangerous for them. The cooperative are not working just in agriculture things. No, we have 15% from the prices going for the social work in the village and with the children, with the family, with the woman, and also we have families. We're cooking for them like every week in Ramadan every day, but every week we send them the food like to be part of this like community who struggle and like resistance every time. For that, like, unfortunately, 2 days ago, we have a conversation like with other, they say about themselves, cooperative. Yeah. And they're like talking about something strange. I have, like they say, we have no problem when we have peace. Yeah. We have no problem to work together with the Israeli farmers. They say that directly and they say about themselves like Palestinian. Said to him, yeah, Zalami, what do you mean like you work with them like as a cooperative? What do you mean like peace? What the peace meaning? You're talking about peace, what the peace meaning? The peace meaning like no occupation. It's not mean the peace meaning taking my land and allowed me to work with you. It's not that the peace. And if you think you're fighting for the peace, like, sorry, like, fuck you and fuck the peace. I don't care about that. I don't care about peace. For me, as Ghassan, I don't care about peace. I care something called freedom. As a farmers and the people in Palestine, we fight for freedom, not the peace. And this is the people should know. That's like ridiculous when like we have many people, especially from the international people who's coming to stand and solidarity with us talking about the peace. If you're coming to talk with me about the peace, no, stay your home. If you're coming to be part of our struggle, you will come. Be part of our struggle. If you think you're coming from United States to protect me, I will say to you, I can protect myself. I don't need your product. I want you to be part of our struggle, to fight together, to struggle together, to tell the world that there is a human being here in the ground who's fighting for them freedom and for dignity. That's how we're working as a cooperative. It's not just about like planting the trees, picking the trees, and sell the trees. No, we are in the struggle. We are in the fighting, like usually every minute in the ground. And also we are in the competition now in the ground. We are in competition with the Hayuval. The organization, it's called Hayuval, it's Zionist Christian organization in Miami, who's like donate like millions of like dollars to take our land and give it to the settlers and like planting as grape and make them like the wine. And they say the best wine from the Israeli land. How we need the education. We need people just to think, not just like to talk about I am cooperative or not, not about to talk like we're making food sovereignty. No one in the ground like care about food sovereignty. Take it from me. All the people now just thinking how to make donation and like just to plant the trees and pick the trees. They didn't care about other things. And that's like make us, we not move one step for the future because we are not standing with each other. We need, as a Palestinian farmers, everyone in the ground with the international people who's believing our struggle to work together to stop this organization called Hayuval or other organization like who's like making how I forget the name. Yeah, to stop them like donation for that. We don't need like to be like selfish. I don't know. I have time to shouting again or not. Okay, I will give the time to Ameed.
I love you, man. This guy, he's not gonna tell, like, I wanna impress on you how much of a backbone,
How much
um,
what?
how much, how much the cooperative in Burin is the backbone of the village. This man organizes the farmers, but he also organizes a sports club that the youth are involved in. Social life, the economy, it's all integrated in relationships of solidarity. Um, and this is an angry man because he's very he's pulling his community, kicking and screaming into a way of living that honestly was the most inspiring thing I saw in Palestine. This is a revolutionary. So I'm very, very, very honored that you're here, Hassan. And thank you for that. We'll have more to say. Give him a round of applause. Hassan has to leave early, unfortunately, so we're going to try to get to Q&A. You didn't mention that settlers uprooted a bunch of trees yesterday in Burin, and as they do. So also, I forgot to say in the beginning of the panel, we are raising funds to send to Burin and to support the cooperative. Okay, we're selling posters in the back. Please hang out and grab some. Sliding scale, $5 to $15. Third World Solidarity Front. We all love them on Twitter, or whatever, Instagram. Anyway, and then we'll send out a link so that you could donate to Ghassan's Ramadan initiative, which I hope you'll have a chance to say more about when the speakers are finished. So thank you again, Ameed. Take it away.
Thank you for everyone for attending here, and I thank any invisible labor that went into the making of this panel. First off, I would like to express solidarity with the Islamic Republic of Iran in its fight against the Epstein ruling class, the ruling class that is intent on burning the world and transforming it into, as a friend calls it, mini West Banks that are powerless and are under comprador regimes that only seek to appease American and Israeli interests. From South Lebanon to Tehran to Caracas to Havana, ideologies may differ, but we are united in to Gaza. We are united in the fight against this ruling class that, as of late, I've begun to more and more believe that they're not the same species of human as we are, as extreme as that may be. Can I share my screen?
Give it a shot. Yeah.
All right. Let me see. Content only. Does that work?
Yep.
I thank everyone for attending this panel, and today I'm going to talk about full sovereignty in the West Bank, how settler attacks and settler colonialism affects it, and the infrastructure of these settler attacks, the settler colonialism in the West Bank. To start, I would like to start with some numbers because they're very much illustrative. At the end of the Second Intifada, when Palestinian resistance in the West Bank was neutralized by U.S., Israeli, PA, cooperation, there were close to 500,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Today, it's nearing 800,000 Israeli settlers. So we're talking about, a 300,000 increase of settlers. In 2025 alone, as per PLO data, there occurred more than 3,000 settler attacks in the West Bank, from uprooting olive trees to arson attacks, to harassing people on the side of the street, to throwing rocks at Palestinian vehicles, you name it, they did it. In 2025, there were 56 cases of land confiscation. And once you see it by the type of incidents that happened to settler attacks, you see that Ramallah was the most affected, the Ramallah area, then the Nablus area, then Hebron, Khalil was most affected. And the reason I bring up these numbers is that they're pretty important to contextualize, because we often get caught up in a lot of qualitative assessments that we forget the numbers. And I think it's pretty illustrative that in 2025, more than 3,000 settler attacks in the West Bank happened that resulted in deaths, injuries, destruction of property, farmland, and the like. And I would like to just go back a bit just before the genocide happened. In early 2023, Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who is also a far right, who is like the gem of the Israeli far right, so to speak, he struck up a deal with the Israeli War Minister Yoav Gallant. And this deal was based on the Israeli civil administration. Now, the civil administration in the West Bank is responsible for maintaining the daily biopolitical needs of Palestinians. They're the ones who manage, IDs. They're the ones who manage, even down to bank transactions. They manage border crossings, and they're in charge of basically every facet of Palestinian life. He struck up a deal with the Israeli War Minister Yoav Gallant to state that the Israeli Defense Ministry now has, the three departments: the settlement department, the Israeli civil administration, and then it has a deputy head of the civil administration. Um, and the deputy head of the civil administration now, as per the 2023 Smotrich-Gallant agreement, which was covert, nobody knew about it. It was leaked to the press, to Israeli press first, and then Western press picked up on it. Smotrich now has a hand in appointing the deputy head of the civil administration, as well as one member in the settlement department. Now, this may be something like that is inconsequential. Maybe it's not that important, but it is very important because the structure of quote unquote occupation, and there are many things that are wrong with the term occupation, but legalistically, at least, Israel maintained for the longest time that yes, this is a military occupation of the West Bank as per international law. And we're responsible for the daily lives of Palestinians. And therefore, we're creating the civil administration as an entity tied to the Israeli War Ministry. Now, what has happened is that the civil administration is now tied to the Israeli Finance Ministry, a civilian institution, an Israeli civilian institution, which means effectively, in the bureaucratic sense, the West Bank has been annexed. And last month, in February, the Israeli security cabinet, approved a law stating that any settler that wants to buy land from a Palestinian, which is a very rare case, but it is very illustrative of the things to come, that wants to buy land from a Palestinian can do it directly without going to the civil administration. Plus, they would create a database where you can find individual Palestinian owners and see their contact info. So they're creating a database for the Israeli settlers to go to this plot of land, click on it, see who owns it, their contact info, and contact them. And this paves the way for treating the West Bank not as the frontier, the colonial frontier, where the settlers can come in and be cowboys. This paves the way for it to be absorbed into the colonial metropole, just as 48 is. And this is very illustrative. This is very important to state in light of continued settler attacks and settler colonial plans for the West Bank. And it is an attack on food sovereignty, as in it paves the way for more annexation of Palestinian land and Palestinian dispossession. There are several settler organizations active in the West Bank, settler NGOs. But I'm going to take just one example, which is the most famous example. It's called Regavim. And Regavim was founded in 2006 by Bezalel Smotrich and Yehuda Eliyahu. And this settler NGO is ostensibly a settler rights NGO. This is what it calls itself. And its role is to go to the Israeli High Court and the Israeli Knesset and the Israeli Security Cabinet and lobby for changes in bureaucratic structures, political decisions regarding the West Bank, and changing the status quo of the West Bank via lobbying. And it has 4 divisions. There's a field divisions where it deploys it is on a voluntary basis. It deploys settlers with drones, GIS mapping capabilities, and satellite imagery to monitor Palestinian construction. So if you're a Palestinian who has land in Area C, technically you're not allowed to build there. But if you build, or if you even have a well there, then Regavim would go in and monitor how you're building it, why you're building it, and petition the Israeli civil administration to take down your well. So they're acting as a big you could say panopticon for Israeli state colonialism in a sense that it's always watching, and it's not tied even to the West Bank. It's in the Naqab, which is called in a Western spelling the Negev and the Golan Heights. Um, there's also a legal division, which the field division gives them the surveillance findings and it translates them into demands and court petitions and lobbying efforts based on specific Israeli law. And there is a parliamentary division, the division which drafts laws and lobbies Knesset members to vote on these laws. And there's also an international division which is concerned with Regavim's PR, but also finding ways of funding, which is very important to state. And I thank Ghassan for touching upon foreign funding. There's a U.S. connection here between Regavim and its activities, and it is the Central Fund of Israel, which acts as a tendon for connecting it to the U.S. It is one of the largest US-based organizations that solicits funds to Israel. From 2019 to 2024, there were $384 million in grants just given from the Central Fund of Israel to Israeli organizations, Israeli NGOs, etc. And 25%, a fourth of Regavim's income, which is $1.8 million out of a $7.7 million dollar budget in 2024, it came from foreign funding, with the bulk of this foreign funding being provided by the Central Fund of Israel. And the Central Fund of Israel doesn't even need to support Israeli organizations. It can also support organizations in the US that support Israeli organizations. So the money flows also a lot of ways. And finding the money flow in this sense, it gets lost between the money forms that they publish. So they fund American Friends of Elon Morey, which is a settlement in the West Bank. It funds the Friedman Center for Peace, which is a very Washington Institute-like think tank in the U.S. It funds the Zionist Organization of America and the Center for Freedom and Safety. Very neocon, very Zionist organizations. But it is important in the light of this to understand that, Palestinians are not passive. They're not passive subjects. They try to resist, even if their means to do so are a lot of times restricted, and they have to be creative, and they have to go above and beyond with their methods. And a great example of this is the Palestinian Cooperative movement. I thank Fathi for touching upon the history, but I would like to emphasize that the Palestinian Cooperative movement, it may have occurred, its modern manifestation during the Jordanian era, but it has its roots within the concept of masha', communal land ownership, that everybody in a village is obligated. There's a social contract of sorts, very implicit, but it is a social contract that you're supposed to help your neighbor if they have a harvest day and they can't harvest all the field. You go in and help them because they will help you once for example, you build a house or you want help with something, you want help in the field. So it's a form of communal land ownership. عونة. If you have a piece of land and you agree with your neighbor, next 2 years I farm this land, the next 2 years you farm it, and we cycle through it, and in a way that sustains the land's fertility also. So it was a very eco-friendly approach to dealing with the land. And unfortunately, the Nakba, Jordanian rule, dispossession of Palestinians, Palestinian de-development in of itself, where the economy was hollowed out by Jordan, by Israel, and most notably by Israel, actually, in favor of a service sector. So Palestinians now, the majority of Palestinian employment is in service sector, whether private or public. So the Palestinian Falah, now isn't uh, doesn't view work in the land as economically viable. They would rather, for example, work for the PA or go work for a settlement, as Fathi said. And the signing of the Oslo Accords accelerated this process because it brought with it the notion of state building and peace building, and the notion that we have to prove ourselves to earn a state. And Palestinians do not have to prove themselves because just as any other people, we are entitled to our form of political expression, whether that may be in the form of a Westphalian state or in any other form. And in that sense, the Palestinian economy was further de-developed. But still, in the late, 2010s, the youth was disgruntled with neoliberalism in the West Bank. So there was a revival of the cooperative movement that was in the 70s and the 80s. And in the 70s and the 80s, it was led by, political organizations, Fatih, PFLP, the Palestinian communists. It was underpinned by a political project. Today, it is more of an individual endeavor, really. And, the examples of cooperatives is of course, the Burin Cooperative. There is also أرض اليأس in Safa, Ramallah, Western Ramallah. أو أرض الفلاح in Kufr also Western Ramallah. But there is a problem with these little projects that are headed by only individuals with no political underpinning behind it, or no political organization behind it, is that it's severely underfunded. Um, to the sense that a lot of cooperatives, which is, it's sad to say, but also kind of funny. A lot of cooperatives start off as cooperatives, but they transition to being political ecology groups. And there are two examples in mind. I don't want to name names here, but there are two examples in mind of that happening where, they start out as a cooperative, then they transition to being a political ecology group to get research grants, because that's the only way they can really sustain themselves. And in building a cooperative model, you have to understand that despite how it serves the purpose of liberation, there's a lot to give up. You give up your entire lifestyle. You give up anything. For example, you go to college, you learn a certain field. You have to give that field up. You have to give up a lot of your free time, and you have to give a lot of energy and a lot of your funds for very, in the US, very, very basic things. So if you want to do, I don't know, your land is near a mountain, you have to bulldoze it, or bulldoze a lot of the mountain to just make it work. That costs a lot here. In the US, it may not cost a lot. An acre of land costs a lot here, but in the US, it doesn't cost a lot. So the numbers add up. Once you start working on the land, the numbers add up, and you have to get funding. A lot of Palestinian cooperatives, they are not quote unquote legalized. They are not registered with the PA, Ministry of Agriculture, and this is primarily due to the fact that first of all, they have a very capitalistic understanding of what a cooperative is. They want a high capital. They want like 15 people on board. They want a certain modus operandi for the cooperative that may not suit people who are very much invested in the non-materialistic aspect of the cooperatives. Um, a lot of them gather under several umbrellas. One of them is the Partnership Youth Forums Cooperatives Network, ملتقى الشراك الشبابي. And they go in there. A lot of them, most of them actually, from what I heard, are very much unregistered with the PM. So it's just an umbrella of them. They gather funds. They get funds from the mother organization, the Partnership Youth Forum, and they also pool funds together to support certain projects. So one year you do something in your land, the other year you do something else. And this provides a stable ecosystem where nobody is nobody's competing for funding, just as they would do for the PA, because under the PA's Ministry of Agriculture, there's a bit of a competition on how to get grants from foreign donors. And it provides an equitable sort of space for everyone to express their opinion, express their needs, and get what they want. And I have to state that a lot of these cooperatives are inherently unprofitable measures, are very much unprofitable endeavors. And the point of the cooperative movement, at least how I understand it today, is that it's building a culture. It's building a culture where maybe materialism isn't the be all end all, especially in the aftermath of the Oslo Accords and the rise of credit-based capital in the West Bank and loans and just general capital development in the West Bank, which is always focused on the service sector. The culture of Palestinian understanding of work has changed. Work used to be sometimes just for the family. It used to be just sometimes for the neighbor, for the broader village. Now it has, a certain neoliberal capitalistic understanding where you need to get compensated. And in this moment where everyone has seen, unfortunately, Gaza starve, a lot of people now, in the West Bank at least, are waking up to the fact that, yes, we need a new model for food sovereignty. And I think these little seedlings of cooperatives here and there may provide, I don't want to say the answer because there is a critique of the cooperative model that I can spend another 2 hours talking about, but I can't. Um, but at least it provides, a model that we can build off of, learn from its mistakes, learn from, its shortcomings and its pros and cons. Um, and here we get to a necessary question, you say all of this, what are you getting at? What I'm getting at here is there is an onus of action for the solidarity movement abroad, because it decenters itself from these questions, from the question of political economy. It decenters itself from the culture of from the questions of food sovereignty. And I think, mapping U.S.-Israel connections that sustain Palestinian dispossession is the foremost priority here. Regavim, how it gets funds from the Central Fund of Israel, and how the Central Fund of Israel also funds a lot of also settler organizations. I think the solidarity movement needs to work on that and lobby, local politicians to, um, to stop this conduit of money. But also, the solidarity movement abroad needs to create sustainable networks, and they need to foster connections to advance Palestinian food sovereignty, and they need to center it, as I said, in political discourse. And for those who are able, cooperatives would welcome any foreign volunteer that comes to work on them on the land. They wouldn't say no. And they need all hands on deck because most of the cooperatives are very much, especially the youth cooperatives, um, are very much, how do I say this? Quote unquote understaffed. Because there is no money involved, there's no financial incentive to be there. You can only see in a cooperative maybe 2 or 3 people working, and they generally believe in this. And depending on their free time also, because they have to juggle their ordinary life from the cooperative life. So I think volunteer hands-on work would be great, and there needs to be a pathway to financially support cooperatives within, the various organizations that, form the mosaic of the solidarity movement in the West. And thank you.
That was great, and also I have a lot to say about what you just said, Ameed. I really believe what you just said. It's very, very important. So we'll talk about it. But Ghassan, are you there? He has to leave. So I want to give him a chance to talk about the Ramadan campaign. Or do you want to take some questions, or do you want to talk about the Ramadan campaign? It's up to you.
Let's take a question. The Ramadan campaign, it's like just we stand with the family and cooking. It's not that big deal.
Okay. They're cooking, guys.
Let's have a
Donate.
question.
Donate. Sorry, they're just gonna take so they. Anybody have questions for Hassan? I have some questions. Hassan,
Yes.
how are the people doing in Malifana after the trees were they replanted the 200 trees?
Sorry, I didn't hear you very well. Can you
In
voice
Malifana, how are they
Yes.
doing?
يعني وادي Bucana now it's military area zoo. It's closed military area zoo after like they start the war. Just like before the war, like 2 days ago or 3 days ago, the settlers cutting around like 60 orange trees, and they destroyed like one house there, and they're stalling like 2 cows. But that's not mean that. Let's like to explain something about that. Like when the settlers cutting the trees and like they're brushing farmers, that's not means like the farmers will kind of leave the house or they will kind of leave the land. No, I think like every attack they're doing, they give us like more energy and more stronger to stay in the land. This is how we deal with that. If they cut 20 trees, we cannot plant 10 because this is our land and we will not gonna leave.
When the law that basically passed, the one that passed a few weeks ago, yeah, are you listening? I've never seen anybody receive more phone calls in my life. He's a busy, busy man. I mean, okay.
Sorry, because we have other meeting like they're just waiting for.
Um,
Yeah.
since the law passed that they can start selling land directly to settlers, and since the one that passed in February, how's it changed things in Burin?
Then it's nothing changed to be honest, but they changed the tear gas. Yani they bring new tear gas to use in Burin. That's like what the change, the real change we have. I think it's like the tear gas has become like part of our life. The tear gas love us and we love the tear gas. And if they use like nuclear weapons, we will not leave Burin and we will not leave like the land. So let them to use what they want and we will gonna stay in our land and we will gonna like planting and we will gonna do it whatever we need because we believe that our revolution will gonna maybe stay more than 100 years. The people who have like short breath, they can go to like live in Europe, United States, whatever they want. We are here struggling until the last breath. That's what we believe and that's what we're doing.
Anybody in the room? I have one final question. If anybody has a question, I see a hand.
You want me to come up for the mic?
No, Ellie.
Bougie. Okay. Hello. First of all, thank you for your time and for your presentations. They were very informative. For context, I organize within the Puerto Rican movement, and there's many parallels that I'm noticing between the Palestinian and Puerto Rican movement with like settlements and shit like that. Ours just have fancy names because they're always appealing to tourist economy. And I also like feel a struggle with like the NGO of it all and how sometimes they cause more harm than good. So I have two questions that can be answered by, I believe, all of you guys in the panel. But one of them is, what is like the major way that y'all like distinct yourselves from like these NGOs? Because I know for us in the Puerto Rican movement, we struggle with like folks being like, oh well, aren't you just another NGO, or what are you gonna do? Because you know, shit's popping off as well as in PR. Obviously not to the same level as Palestine and the West Bank, and now with this war in Iran, we can fucking imagine how much worse it gets. But that's like one of my first questions, and then I have a second question, just because we also do cooperatives. I am a little bit curious about the critiques on cooperatives, but I understand that's a whole separate conversation and time and yada. But yeah, that's really it for me at least.
Those are great questions. We'll direct them at Ghassan. The question: how are cooperatives different from NGOs?
We are in the problem with the NGOs. We will never like be in the NGO side. Listen, as a cooperative, we will never like accept to work under agenda. Even that agenda like will cannot be like it's revolution agenda, and they want to just like make ourselves to do what they want. Yeah, the NGOs, they use you like just to bring money from outside. The cooperative, you do what you want and your work bring the money, and we will not gonna be like just as a money dogs, you know. We will never like be like that. Fuck the money. I don't care about the money. I care about the work in the ground. That's what I want from the cooperative, not from the what exactly the NGOs want me to do. I should do because they have a lot of money. No, I will not. I will let them like to follow me and do what I want from the land. That's what I believe. That's our cooperative. For that, we are poor cooperative. You know, we don't have a lot of money.
Thank you.
And we don't care about money, to be honest. Yeah. The last thing we care about is the money. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one last question because I know you have to leave. What you got a room full of revolutionaries here who want to follow you into battle, Ghassan. What can we do to support the cooperative movement? What can we do to support Burin? What do you need from in the form of solidarity from the West, from the solidarity movement? What's the most important stuff?
I don't need solidarity, to be honest. I need people like to be part of our struggle, you know. And I don't want like you to support me and for funding and to have some money every time. No, I want you just to have the education that's Palestine from the river to the sea. This is what I believe, and this is what we work for it. And we don't care what the people say about like border 67 or not, or no. That's I don't care about it. Palestine is Palestine. This is what I believe, and this is what we need the people to know. This is Zionist. They kill our children, they kill our land, and they take our land. They kill everybody here, and they take it from us. And we have the duty to use all the struggle to take our land back. I don't, sorry, like some people say about non-violence and they say about violence. No, the struggle and the fighter is fighter. I don't care about non-violence. I care that our land should back to us. That's it.
I see one more. Do you have to leave now, Ghassan?
I think I should go. Sorry, like people killing me by them phone because we have meeting in the village.
Glad your cousin's here.
Mahmoud.
Thank you, Ghassan. Really appreciate it. So it's fuck peace, fuck money, fuck the occupation.
I can answer the question about critiques. I'm sorry my camera is off, but I'm charging the laptop from a separate place and the background is kind of messy.
Sorry, guys, just one second. I have like to thank you so much. I have to go. Really, I'm happy to be with you. I hope we can like meet another time and have the like better time and long time to answer all your questions. Thank you so much. See you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you.
I mean, we are going to have Fatin present, and then we'll take a break. I think we'll save that because and then we'll have a longer discussion section if that's okay with you, Ahmed. And we'll just give people a chance
No, of
to
course.
extend. Okay, thank you both. So, Fatin.
Salam everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much to Ghassan, Ameed, and Fathi, and thank you to Naseem for bringing us here. My name is Fatin Jarara, and I'm a Palestinian organizer here on Lenape land. I've been organizing primarily with PAL-Awda, New York, New Jersey, since I was a kid, literally. And I'm a neighbor, I would say, to the Burin people. I'm from Asir al-Shamaliya, very close, I think. It's been a pleasure to listen to these incredible organizers on the ground about the work that they're doing, which is really important. Can you imagine how hard it is for us to organize in New York City, for example, for Palestine? Imagine being right there on your land, trying to organize, honestly, just trying to live, let alone organize. You're already criminalized for just living as a Palestinian on Palestinian land. And then imagine that you're an organizer, a very leftist, organizer or whatever, as Ghassan was painted. And you're often not only just attacked and brutalized by the IOF or the settlers, but you are imprisoned. I wanted to kind of contextualize some of the stuff that these incredible organizers, comrades, siblings have brought to us today, because it is really remarkable the type of work that they're doing, and under the conditions that they're doing it it's incredible that they are sustaining themselves in this way. It's not a surprise that Ghassan has been imprisoned for the type of work that he's done, and actually many Palestinians, especially men, are often imprisoned either indefinitely or definitely by the occupation, and sometimes not even really for organizing, just simply existing as Palestinians. But of course, if you are a Palestinian activist and organizer, you face harder times in a so-called justice system that has a conviction rate, if you are even tried, of 99% for Palestinians and 1% for the Israeli settlers and the military. So take that how you want to. I think what I want to talk about today is bringing it back to where we are here and the type of work that PAL-Awda has done in the recent past. Just reminding everyone too that even though it might be easy for us to call what happened on and since October 7th, 2023, the genocide, that Palestinians have always believed that it's always been a genocide, rather it being so direct. Often it is, but the genocide has begun even before 1948. So for us, the theft of our lands, the uprooting of our trees, the killing of our people and our sheep and our cattle, everything, the stealing of our water, all of that is a form of genocide. And I appreciate people referring to the last 2.5 years as the genocide, but I also want to remind people that genocide can look like all of the things that we are discussing today, and not just the brutal assault on the people of Ghassan. May they be steadfast. And I want to also share my solidarity with the people in Gaza, the people in Iran, and Iran's right to defend itself, and the global South's right to defend themselves and for self-determination, from Puerto Rico to the Philippines, to Iran, to Gaza, everywhere. Yes, so what we've been doing here, and please let me know how much time, because I might ramble on for a while. We obviously have been responding to the things that have been happening in Palestine, and specifically in Gaza, for the last 2.5 years. But we also have been made aware even more recently, although I think it's been happening for a long time. I think there has been an even greater effort to have more people settle from, New York and wherever else, California, Florida, Canada, other countries, to Palestine in order for these settlers to serve the Zionist ideology and do the things that end up, impacting our siblings in Palestine in the way that you have seen. So there are these land sales that happen all over New York City, very close here, different parts of Brooklyn and Queens, Long Island, New Jersey, and we've been responding to them. And we believe that the way that we have been coming to respond to these land sales is as direct action as it can get without it being direct action, if you're familiar with direct action, because we're face to face with these very well-funded institutions, often posing as nonprofit organizations, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But these people who, and real estate agencies who go around and host these sales at houses of worship, synagogues, and community organizations, very strategically so that they can say that the people who are coming to protest them are anti-Semitic, quote unquote, anti-Jewish. They do host these events that are Jew-only events. They look to make sure that anyone who attends can prove their Jewishness in order for them to get access to these events. And we have found out that not only are they advertising, houses and homes and properties in 48, they're also doing the same for settler lands and places in the West Bank and Nablus and other areas of Palestine that the whole international community, including the United States, does deem to be illegal for them to do so. So they're violating a lot of laws in this way by selling properties on settlement lands, but also having discriminatory events that will only allow certain people access. And we've been responding to them in different ways. We've been serving them papers, legal papers, and with PAL Law Commission. And we've been obviously, showing up to these sales when we find out where they are. I think we've done a really good job because nowadays when they do have them, they used to advertise the site pretty publicly. And now what they do is they'll say that, you'll find out when you register, and sometimes the heat is too strong that they just end up either canceling the events or moving virtually. And then of course we find ways to disrupt the events when they happen virtually. So this has been a really important thing that we feel is necessary for people to know about and for people to support, because this is a way for folks here to combat the kind of thing that happens there. Because as our brother Ghassan said, a lot of the settlers that live near Burin and, assault, attack, burn, uproot, steal, etc., come from these communities. They are people who are not houseless. They're not people who have no homes or people who have no citizenship. They have a belonging somewhere. But in order for them to serve the Zionist ideology and to fulfill this fantasy of supremacy, they are given opportunities, oftentimes funded by these nonprofits that take them from here and go wreak havoc over there so that they can serve this ideology and this supremacist fantasy and make it impossible for Palestinians to live on their own land. And lots of these organizations pose as nonprofits. I mean, I was trying to take pictures of Ameed's presentation to see if I can find some correlations, and I bet I could, between some of those large, conglomerate funds that fund these settler organizations that again are posing as nonprofits, collecting funds and getting tax breaks And I know I talked to you, Naseem, about the was it Defund Racism and the Not on Our Dime campaign that Zohran Mamdani, before he was mayor, was a state assembly member, started this campaign, and I think it needs to be rebooted under Defund Racism for this very reason, that these institutions that are among us are taking people who, again, are not houseless, who don't have housing insecurity, are not stateless. They belong somewhere, and they the whole purpose of these organizations is for them to go and settle in Palestine so that they can take more land and more resources away from Palestinians. I also want to touch on something that has been happening for a long time here to community members in Brooklyn and in Queens and other places who are victims of deed theft by Zionists as well. Because I think that if you are doing something like this, or you are stealing from people, you are a Zionist. It doesn't matter how you identify, like this is Zionist behavior. And I'm pretty sure they have connections to actual Zionists in Palestine. But recently, the Brooklyn, I think the district attorney's office convicted a man named Sanford Salmi, who has been found to have stolen at least 11 properties from primarily Black homeowners. Some I think are brown. This is an effort where people who are facing financial hardships or trying to hold on to their homes, and imagine what a big feat it is to own property in New York. Like, just think about it for yourself. Like, take a minute and think where you are. Think if you can even envision this as a reality for yourself, because I know it's very hard. But some people manage, you know, and some people get there. And of course, maintaining that reality is a very difficult thing to do in a place like New York. And imagine that you're someone who is doing everything right, everything that you could possibly do. One day somebody comes posing as a lawyer, maybe finds out that somebody in your family passed away, or you are facing financial hardship, or you are facing bankruptcy, foreclosure, etc., and offers to help you. But instead what they do is they unknowingly to you sign your deed to them. And this is what happened in this case. This man is believed to have been linked to not only 11 property thefts, but nearly 250. There is a coalition named the People's Coalition to Stop Deed Theft. And they're pretty, I would say, really close to this area too, in Crown Heights and Bed-Stuy. So they're doing really incredible work to bring to the forefront this really horrible thing that has been happening to our community members. And again, it's often very vulnerable people who are being tricked into signing away their deeds, or in some cases coerced by way of estranged family, for example, or something like that. I was reading up about situations where it's like somebody who has partial ownership can be tricked or manipulated or coerced into selling their share, and then of course these Zionists will come in and threaten to sue, you know, the remaining people who own the property, in order for there to be like a deal to be struck on these properties. So it's really terrible. It happens on a pretty, you know, individual scale as we see here, but it also obviously happens on a pretty large scale. I think we've all seen that when Mamdani took office, he was advocating for he was trying to intervene in this sale of over 5,000 apartments. And I think the Pinnacle real estate, Pinnacle apartments. And I think, I'm not sure if it's all of them or many of them were rent stabilized, but it was like a value of nearly $500 million that ended up being sold to an Israeli real estate agency, the US arm of an Israeli real estate agency right here in New York, in Brooklyn. So these things happen a lot right in our backyards by people who are, honestly, they're our neighbors. They're our community, so-called community members, right? They live among us, they work among us, and they find ways for them to take up more property, not because they need it themselves to make time, but to make for them to have housing security. It's because of greed and capitalism and the things that have been discussed previously by our comrades. In order for them to gain control and to just make more money. I mean, in the case of this attorney, he was an attorney, this man who was finally convicted. And by the way, if you ask the victims, they would say that getting up to 7 years, I believe it was really very, very little, because, you know, he stole so much and he was collecting rent. And it wasn't like he needed all of these properties, but obviously he wanted to have so much money and control. And I also wanted to touch up on ways that I think we can support what's happening here in New York and what's happening in Palestine. I really loved, you know, the idea that, you know, while I love the idea of peace, who doesn't actually want peace? But if peace can come, it has to come at the cost of dignity and justice, then we don't want that peace. We don't want peace at all. And peace will never come without dignity and justice. And for Palestinians, it is getting our land back from the river to the sea. How do we show up for each other? You know, I think it was really great for folks to say, you know, you don't have to go all the way to Palestine, as good of a practice as it is to bear witness to what is happening and to be protected, because honestly, you can only do so much before these New York settlers, you know, attack you and threaten you. And then, you know, you might be even a liability to the Palestinians that are there, that all they're trying to do is you know, harvest their crops and just live on their land. But to show up honestly for oneself and for your own community, finding out about like the things that happen in our own communities, how do we sustain each other? How do we show up for each other? You know, how do we show up for the folks whose homes are being stolen? How do we show up for folks who are facing housing insecurity, food insecurity? There's so much that we can do here. And I do believe that in the way that we are learning from one another and from the people who are struggling in Palestine and struggling right here on Turtle Island in the Lepé lands, we can do so much in order to sustain ourselves and to grow. And that for Palestinians, I think, I speak as a Palestinian who lives in New York, but I do believe that Palestinians would love to see a world where everyone can see justice and everyone can realize justice for themselves. And that is a world that we envision can happen. It will not be possible if we are not working with each other, but also making sure that we are taking care of ourselves and taking care of, you know, our neighbors, our community members. And community to you can mean, you know, extending beyond, you know, a couple of blocks from where you live. But ask yourself too, like, do you even know your neighbor? You know, New York City makes it really hard sometimes to really know one another. And the good thing about being in Palestine is that everybody knows everybody, you know, like there is a neighborly feeling. People are not left behind in a way that we see here in New York and in very capitalist societies. And as much as the Zionist occupation wants to make Palestine, you know, a capitalist place, community and solidarity and activism rooted in community and rooted in siblinghood and in those principles will always, you know, win over. And if we can do that, if we can sustain places like Another World, for example, for many years, that is one thing that we can do, you know, provide food and clothing and a place to be, to just exist, which is really scarce in New York. And I know we want to get into the Q&A, so I'm looking forward to the discussion. And thank you once again to Naseem and everyone that's really said that.
Thank you so much. And I just wanna uplift that. Show up to these land sale protests, please. This, I mean, if you want to stop the process of ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, this is a direct way to do it. Okay, like show up to these land protests. And then a second thing, shout out PAL-Awda.
And I think so perfect. I think that our strategy has been so, so strong and powerful that I totally forgot to mention. It was like, you hopefully will have heard about this, but we just had a city hall rally on Wednesday where, a hearing was happening about a bill that's being introduced, or two bills that's being introduced on a city level, then there's another one on a state level. Basically, kind of guising as a bill to protect houses of worship and also like health clinics, like abortion clinics. So like, to discourage people from protesting, outside of abortion clinics, which is great. But they're, lumping that with the kind of work that we're doing that we have the right to do, because it is not my fault that, some people decide to have these illegal sales happening at synagogues. And I have the right as a Palestinian, as a concerned person in New York, to go and protest these sales wherever they may be. So we have become so strong that, we're being targeted in a criminal way, basically. If these bills pass, then we could face felony charges, essentially. And that's why it's really important for us to, to show up to these kind of things and to make sure that our officials know that we oppose, the sales to begin with. If they don't want us to protest outside of houses of worship, the officials should be concerned to not let these sales happen in the first place. So that's where we can start. So I just wanted to mention that in case I forgot. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's take a break, right? Let's take a break. I think 7 minutes, and then we'll come back and reconvene. Before we go on break, please check out the posters. We are raising money for the Burin Land Agricultural Cooperative, an organization that we want to have a continued relationship with. So buy some posters; they're cool. And then I'll let you know when we'll start up again.
Yes, I am.
So I'm gonna start off with a little moderated discussion because there's stuff I would like to address. I want to talk about. You mentioned defund racism. I think it's a really good opportunity to talk about what we can do here, right? We saw, thanks to Ameed's presentation and Fatin's presentation, we are very intimately and closely connected to the atrocities that are happening in the West Bank. They're happening here. Like, I always think about New York and America kind of being like La La Land. It's like not the real world. You know what I mean? Because the consequences of the actions that happen here, you don't happen there. Like, it's paper pushing here. And then it's people losing their land. It's having their, I mean, when I was in Palestine, the number of people that I was there when they were, you just hear another teenager killed by settlers for harvesting their crops. So I want to touch on that, and then I want to touch on why food sovereignty is resistance, and the political economy of that kind of thing. So to start with, let's talk about these NGOs. What can we do? How do we stop the money spigot?
Yeah, I think the first thing you can do is look them up and see which they are. A lot of them are based in New York. I think too that if you find out about like a land sale, for example, because that might not be a NGO necessarily, but like a real estate agency, and you find out that they are happening in your neighborhood, you can always call up the hosting place, whether it is a synagogue. I mean, we've had some folks, comrades who are anti-Zionist Jews say that they've called those places as I guess you could call them congregation members, to raise concern about them. And sometimes they'll get like an answer like, oh yeah, it's too late for us to cancel or something. We're under contract by blah, blah, blah. But at least you can show concern that these things are happening in your communities. And I think too, Zohran Mamdani is our mayor now. You can hit him up and be like, hey, whatever happened to no, lots of pressure.
Let him know.
Lots of pressure. Not on our dime. Are you gonna continue to pursue that now that you're mayor? Not on our dime. And I think maybe you can talk a little bit more about defund racism, but not on our dime was a pretty, decent campaign to highlight the fact that we are giving tax credits to these settler organizations right here in New York City. And it lasted for, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half or something. And then the website is still there. You could still look it up. You could still
It's still around.
look up his involvement. I think he was one of the co-founders of that campaign. But then you can pressure him and his administration to stop or further like this campaign into actually existing. And little by little, I think we can, ebb or whatever at the Zionist efforts to take lands and resources from here, from New York, and of course from Palestine. So I think the first thing you can do is be educated. You can always follow us on PAL-Awda on Instagram and other social media, PALAWDA. The hearing time has expired for these two bills that I mentioned earlier, the city bills, but we're basically waiting to see what comes up out of that, but we've had good response to it. I think the rally went really well, and we've had a lot of really incredible testimonies from all kinds of people, legal experts and community organizers. Everyone really came up and testified either in person or online, and it was really great to see. And of course, the Zionist defense in that hearing was like, religious freedom, and you don't have the freedom to advertise, these horrible events. You should not feel comfortable to do so. Will continue to make you uncomfortable until they stop altogether. So, but yeah, well, we are gonna ramp up our efforts for the state one, because I think that one is going to make it really difficult for us to organize. And the state one doesn't only just include religious places of worship, religious institutions, but it also includes educational institutions. So it would make it really hard, obviously, for student organizing, for people responding to student activism, as hard as it is already to organize on campuses. Imagine how much more difficult it would be if it was criminalized. And the thing is too about the religious institution thing is that we found that people are saying that they have a prayer room in their house as an excuse to not have, we've seen it in New Jersey, for example, where these bills did pass in some townships, where people have now claimed that, like, if you protested outside of their homes, well, you were doing something illegal because they have a dedicated prayer room. So their place of residence is exempt, from protesting. So obviously these bills work really hard to make it really, really difficult for us to do the kind of work that we do. And that's why we need to show up for these kinds of efforts, the land sales, the hearings. I do believe that we can, find something to do. I mean, some people don't really like to believe in the system or that it would help. But at PAL-Awda, we believe that we have to do everything we can. Like, we can't just rely on one form of resistance and activism. We have to try to do it all in all ways, like the legal way, the illegal, well, I can't say. The legal way and the not so, the, you know what I mean?
The
like
legal ways.
The legal ways and
There's only
the
legal
creative
ways.
ways.
There you go.
The creative.
Creative ways. That's
Yeah.
good. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, on the tip of like of informing ourselves. I mean, how okay, defund racism. Has anybody heard of that? Oh, I see 2 hands going. 3 hands. Hell yeah. It's a campaign that has been around for a while. That is in a lull, but I believe is ripe and ready to spring back into action. These charities that send money over to commit war crimes are tax exempt. So actually, we are technically you, it's tax season coming up. You are sending money to commit war crimes. And Ameed, a brilliant researcher, has been telling me about the relationships and the villages in the West Bank and how we know about these crimes being committed.
Yeah, it's those organizations that receive funding on either side of the pond. The U.S. side, the Israeli side. Um, the U.S. side under 401, tax tax declarations, they're obliged to actually state what they're sending and who they're sending the money to. So you can see that on like databases on their financial reports. On the Israeli side, you have to dig a lot through Hebrew stuff, but it would also be visible. So if you go into Regavim's, financial reports, you can see who they're getting money from. And really, there's an excellent legal justification for how, these types of charities should be outlined, is that they're funding violence overseas. They're funding violence based on an ethnic declaration because Regavim, and I always take Regavim as an example because it's the most blatant. It surveils Palestinian quote unquote violations of building, but it doesn't surveil Jewish violations of building. So there's a legal backbone here to stand on, in the sense of they're funding violence against a specific ethnic group. Um, and seeing how their violence affects villages, well, as per Israeli law, every NGO needs to declare its activities, and Regavim puts out yearly reports that, even though they're the tip of the iceberg, can and would start an investigation into their activities by the Attorney General, Letitia James. So, once you put the evidence to Letitia James, she is obliged to investigate. This would grant her powers to delve into their activities more than any researcher can do, because she has that power to delve into lots of stuff that is unpublished, lots of stuff that is not said out loud, and she would have, more resources to tap into than just researchers. So in that sense, it's only a matter of how do we compile the evidence against them. And I want to say something here. Defund racism has been around for a real long while, upwards of like 5 years by now. And in the Good Shepherd Collective, the one responsible for the campaign, we try our utmost to um, how do I say this? Gather anyone who is interested in the campaign and form an umbrella of sorts, of advocacy for this specific issue, because we know as an organization that critiques NGOs and the NGO structure and liberal Zionist institutions in the US, in a goal as conservative as this, in the grand scheme of things, we're not going to liberate Palestine. In a goal as conservative as this, we need all hands on deck. And if these institutions that we critique, that we know are opportunistic, and some of them were involved in the Not on Ramadan campaign, I have to say. They were pretty involved. Um, if we have to work with them, then so be it, because this issue cuts across the entirety of the West Bank. It doesn't affect just one West Bank community. You can see it in Hebron, you can see it in Nablus, you could see it in Tubas, Jenin. Every town, city in the West Bank is affected by this money going from the US to Israel. And in this sense, as I said, there are pathways to start an investigation. We just have to kickstart. So we're kind of the fire starter of it all. So once you start the fire, it just goes on its own.
Yeah, I think. Can you guys hear me? Oh. You named a target. You named a goal. You named an enemy. I mean, this is all stuff that make up a successful campaign. So I want to just repeat what you said. If you report to Letitia James's office a complaint, it compels her office to have an investigation. And any one of us, you're telling me any one of us could submit a complaint?
Yes, you could go to her office and file a complaint and say, well, here's the evidence.
Yeah.
And here are the yearly reports of Regavim, and here's the money flow, and here's the legal argument.
Yeah.
And you could get it done.
I think we put fine enough point on that. Everybody here has an email address recorded. I hope you won't mind us emailing you more about that. Questions in the room? We got you and then.
Hi, thank you so much for the daily work and talking to us. I have a question about political economy of farming and food sovereignty. Can you tell us a little bit more? I think this is like a major sort of sovereignty and security tactic, is like making insurance systems for when harvests fail or are uprooted, or sometimes material insurance like tool maintenance and tool sharing. Can you talk about how some of those systems work, or if those are things that we can support or build?
Another question, and then we'll answer both.
Thanks. My question is about organizing strategy here in Brooklyn. I guess maybe this is more for Fatin, but I'm interested in the strategy of going against landlords as a way of going against landlordism as a way of also attacking support for settlers in Palestine. And I mean, it's just so striking to me that half a mile up the street, there's a community that owns most of the buildings that people here live in, and the people on this block live in, that is committing rampant deed theft, as you said, but is also responsible for the regular, ordinary predation of landlordism. And also within this community are many like actual settlers who are literally going to settle in the West Bank or wherever, and who are organizing land sales here. And there's just such a strong overlap, and I don't know, just the way that these two issues intersect and overlap and connect the international to the hyperlocal, and issues of like housing and quality of life here, and with imperialism abroad. So I think my question is just, I'm interested in hearing more thoughts about what that strategy might look like. Just as a space here that is right in the middle of all of this, that is dealing with people every single day who come in who have problems that are downstream of their rent. And also, a space where I think the majority of stuff on the walls here, it's for the Palestinian liberation. And so, yeah, I'm interested in that strategy, and I'm curious about if people have thoughts on what the organizing might look like, how to attack that.
Okay, so we'll start with the first question about political economy of farming and insurance and how we can support that, and then we'll move on to the question about landlordism.
I mean, in Palestine, there's no safety net, and that's the issue right now, is that there is no safety net. So if farmers, have a bad year, nobody's gonna compensate them. If settlers come and attack their field and destroy their crops, nobody's gonna compensate them. Contrast that with the very, very, very subsidized Israeli agricultural sector, and you can see why, how Israeli crops and why Israeli crops are dominating the West Bank market, for example, not Palestinian crops. And this is an issue of how the PA trajectory, the trajectory of the PA, because every state, if it's not an idiotic state, I have to say, um, subsidizes its agriculture and has a safety net for its producers. Not the case here, and not the case in a lot of places in the Arab world, because we're ruled by people who have. Sorry, I gotta take my laptop elsewhere to charge, but I'm gonna, my video is gonna be out, but I'm here. So when we're talking about how we can support, West Bank farmers, I think the primary issue here is that they have no insurance, they have no safety net. And I think the best avenue to go about this is to create from, the solidarity network, from the solidarity movement in the West, for the Palestinian Americans in the West, because Palestinian Americans have relatives, and the relatives know someone probably who is a farmer or is part of cooperative somewhere. And these connections could pave the way for pathways to financially support, those farmers in a way that is sustainable, in a way that builds up their capital, allows them to sustain their operations. In an ideal scenario, it wouldn't have come to this if the PA was focused on at least maintaining a modicum of leeway or leverage against Israel, but it is an entity that only sinks lower in its depravity, not doesn't concern itself with Palestinian well-being. For the case of landlordism and the connections between the landlords in New York and them being settlers in Palestine. I think it's pretty illustrative, just as a side note. I think it's pretty illustrative that, I was part of a study abroad study visit in Colombia, and I was hosted by a fancy university in Colombia, most prestigious, etc. And we were supposed to advise them on a certain project, and we digged into this project. It's called Progressa Fenicia, I believe. And the bulk of this project actually was there is a university, it's walled off, and next to it is a poor neighborhood. They wanna completely destroy the old neighborhood and build, student dormitories, malls, all this type of stuff. And the local residents are rallying against it. We managed, through objecting to give any policy proposals to this project, and also uh, uh, supporting students who built networks with the residents of the neighborhood to stop the project, thankfully. But when we were doing interviews with the residents there, they found out I was from Palestine. And they said, so you're from Palestine, so you know how this feels. This feels like colonialism. And ever since, I heard that, it's been stuck in my mind about how, you know, people often dismiss, solidarities on the basis of they're pretty abstract, they're pretty, you know, mm, you know, too idealistic, etc., etc. But I think in this case, Palestine represents every single contradiction that is around the world. It's all condensed in this little piece of land. Like 1 hour drive from the tip of Palestine to the south. It's like it's a pretty small place. Um, so with regards to landlordism in New York, I think focusing first and foremost on making available these connections via education, um by just letting the local community know that, of course, those are Israeli settlers would help a long way, but also, focusing on the community organizing aspect in New York, and trying to combat these landlords would also strike a blow to them as settlers in Palestine. Because in reality, when those, landlords come to Palestine, they're investing their money in Israel. And when they invest their money in Israel, they have more of an incentive to, go to Israel and settle there. So if you strike at the money revenue base, I believe, um, you can create the conditions whereby, at the very least, they're not colonizing Palestine because there's no incentive to actually go and colonize it. And Israel right now is facing an existential crisis of sorts because it's not the safest place for Jews to be in. It's not the safest, when you are a militaristic entity like Israel is, it's not safe for you. You're creating enemies everywhere, and you're not helping yourself or your future. So, the notion that they would also go to Israel without a material incentive, I think now it's pretty squashed. There's no incentive for a Jewish person to go to Palestine and settle there. So I think starting at the community organizing level, education, making sure, these connections are highlighted will help a long way.
Fatin?
Yeah, I think it would be interesting if anyone here has experience with that kind of work too, like tenant union organizing. For example, I don't think the comrade is here. Oh, you are? If you want to say anything, I would love to hear from you. But I think like everybody's experiences are different, obviously. You might have like a small landlord or a big landlord, right? If you live in a big building, maybe the company that owns your building isn't Israeli or isn't Zionist, but you can find out whether or not it has investments and Zionist projects or in Israel, etc. If you're if you're living in a small building and you're not sure what your landlord's politics are, for example, it would be helpful to know. I mean, I honestly would really feel very unsafe and uncomfortable if I lived in a building where I knew the principles and the values of the landlord didn't align with mine, because eventually they might find out who I am and whatever, and like really know about me and make it really difficult for me to live there. It's a very vulnerable place, obviously, and it is kind of scary to think that we are at the mercy of these landlords. And I remember, for example, how the fire that broke out in the Bronx that killed so many people, we found out that they were Zionist landlords who were pretty good friends with Eric Adams, and they continuously had violations that ended up resulting eventually in this really horrible thing that happened. And so many of these things happened in New York and in other places because of not just because of neglect, but because of these relationships that benefit some people but end up hurting many people, like tenants and people who are just living, so I think that you can just start really small, honestly, with organizing and just finding out like who am I renting from? Like what's their story? I can tell you that as a Palestinian, even where I eat, I'm always like, who owns this place? What's their story? What's their business? And it'll be really hard to find someone that completely aligns with everything that you're aligning. I think even amongst ourselves, we might not 100% be aligned, but it is good to know like where we are investing our time, energy, and resources, including our money and where we live. And you can always, if you find out, for example, that your landlord is a Zionist, or the company that owns your building or whatever are Zionists or have investments, what does it really hurt to like go around and knock on the doors of your neighbors, finding out like you can start as saying, look, maybe we've never met, but I've always felt like I should know my neighbor, and I think that is a sentiment that we should all have, no matter what. But now we have something that we might want to, at least know about. Like, hey, did you know that our landlord is a raging Zionist? And honestly, they might not care. Look, I think that we have to also understand that, unfortunately, the way the system is it really is working for us to be so depleted and exhausted that we just barely have any energy to just survive sometimes. Look at it like everywhere. I mean, that's why I think it's really remarkable for folks to know what people are doing on the ground in Palestine, because as impossible of a feat it is to just be there as a Palestinian, like people are still making it work. And here, I think if little by little we can convince ourselves first and foremost, and then each other, that, it really does benefit us to work together and organize together. Even if we don't accomplish that much, I mean, I think that the pinnacle organizers would say that it was worth their time to continue to organize. And it has raised so much awareness, not just about the state of like being a tenant in a big building that ended up being sold to like a foreign company, or like the US arm of a foreign company that's not invested in the well-being of the tenants, but just invested in acquiring assets and power and material wealth. But it was worth it for them because they could say that they raised awareness about their plight, they raised awareness about Palestine. People can find out that the greed is intertwined between Zionists and capitalists, and it's all one basically. And we, as much as we want to attain goals that I think are possible and are attainable, sometimes we don't. Like sometimes we have to be accepting of the fact that we might not see the results that we want to see, but it's the process of getting there that empowers us, I believe. So yeah, I'm really interested to hear what folks have to say about this, because I have mine, and I know that we have some cool narratives too as well.
There's a question about critiques of cooperatives. I just remembered it.
Right. So why don't we take that as our final question? And if you can keep it brief, and then
Okay.
words, and then we'll
Yeah, I mean, with regards to like critiques of cooperatives, it's mainly a very academic critique, is that, when writing about Palestinian food sovereignty, it's often brought up as the be all end all paradigm. And I think if it was the be all end all paradigm, it wouldn't have stagnated the way it has. Because in reality, the cooperative movement, while very efficient in the 70s and 80s, it is very susceptible to attack. It's very susceptible to, it disbanding if it does not have a political organization behind it. Fatih, the PFLP, the communists, DFLP were behind, these cooperatives in the 70s and 80s. And once that political cover sorts, which comes, of course, with funds, it comes with connections, etc., etc. Once that cover was, removed, people just did not want to participate in the cooperatives. So there is a real challenge with the cooperative movement is how to make it sustainable, not profitable, just sustainable. Sustainable for a modest life, for someone to be in a cooperative and have their whole life revolve around the cooperative. That is a very hard endeavor. But also to make it, dynamic to changes, to circumstances happening, and the aspect of decentralizing production. How can we decentralize production but centralize it in a political goal? That's also a challenge, definitely. So if there are any short critiques of the cooperative paradigm, it's merely very academic, very, I guess, ivory tower, you could say. It stems from an ivory tower of sorts, but it's very important questions, I believe.
Yeah, what you were saying, I mean, just kind of reminded me too, in a way, about how we can show up for each other. I mean, I was mentioning, some people might know that they have there are situations that they don't want to be in, like having Zionist landlords, or even something like working for the city, where we know that there's bonds invested in, like Zionist, in the Zionist entity. And, I might be in a position where I might expect my neighbor or my colleague or whoever to care. And maybe they can care if they had less things to care about. But sometimes, my circumstances are a little different than somebody else's circumstances. So one thing that we can think about is that how can I get my neighbors to care? If I can alleviate anything off of them, or just take something off of their plate. I mean, I would, I've heard from the Pinnacle organizers, or the Crown Heights Tenant Union organizers, say that, like, we would show up for each other in ways, for example, we would offer like childcare, so that, parents can organize, and parents can do the kind of work that they want to do that they wouldn't normally be able to do because they didn't have child care available. They could take rotations, if like somebody's meant to do something on a day and they're just really tired, or they just can't do it, we can rely on each other. And there's just so many ways for us to show up that really don't need a lot. Maybe we can just be creative in the way that we show up for each other, but I don't need to be very rich, for example, in order for me to make organizing happen. But I can provide little resources, whatever resources that I can share, whatever time I can share, whatever energy I can share, so that we can just show up for each other, and so that people can feel like I have a moment to care about something else besides survival, besides like everything that I have to care about every single day for the rest of my life. So, yeah, we can show up for each other, and just think about ways that we can do so.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. I'm gonna just say some stuff, and then we can wrap. Thank you guys for sticking around we went 50 minutes over. So I just, okay, sorry. I'm gonna have to just like synthesize some of what I heard. And I think it's really something that Ghassan says a lot is organizing his cooperative is very hard because everybody is basically that we are involved. We are completely enmeshed with a liberal ideology, and what both of you are pointing at is we need to think about how we create new social relations with each other, and we need to think about how we can place those social relations in the context of class struggle, right? and something I appreciate Ghassan says is he doesn't need your help or your protection or your solidarity even, right? Like and something that's very clear from the discussion that we had today is we have levers that we need to be pushing and we need to be pulling and destroying, and things that are in our backyard that wouldn't just help the Palestine solidarity movement, would help free us. Something that I really believe is like when people are like, we're going to free Palestine. No, Palestine, that's not the goal, right? Like Palestinians will free Palestine. We will have to free ourselves. And that's even harder, right? That's even harder to think about. But that's the task. And I say all that to say this. The two things that I learned were the most urgent tasks when I was in Palestine, in my opinion. Shutting off this fucking money to the settlers and building solidarity and sending our money to the cooperatives. Those are two tasks that we can do. That we can do it. It's achievable. Turn off their money spigot and turn on ours. And so I want to just tease that we're going to be continuing to build with the Burin Land and Agricultural Cooperative here in Another World. Specifically, this organization and that organization are going to build connections where we are able to learn and share and set resources and become cool revolutionaries like Ghassan. And we can all be like him when we grow up, and except not beat up as much as he gets beat up by inshallah. I mean, okay, so you can find that funny.
Being beat up is the mark of a revolutionary, so.
Yeah, you gotta get beat up a little. Come on now. So please donate to the Burin Cooperative. Please donate to Another World. Why not? Why not? And please give a hand to Fatin and Ameed. Thank you all so much. Give a hand to yourself.
Thanks for having me.
Ellie in the back. Ellie, the dancer, the actress that took you up. To Mark, to Jockey, appreciate it. And everybody, Garen. And then let's go. Let's wrap up. Oh my god, this is long. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you all. Ameed, appreciate you, man.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye bye.